Hello, welcome to the video notes for lesson 3.2. This is all about linear or not linear. And this begins on page 5 from your notes packet. The worksheet that you have should look just like this. And let's start with our target. So, our target says, I can, from an equation, complete a table and a graph of linear and nonlinear equations. So on page 5 we have some examples. Now some of you may be able to answer this, but not all of you will be able to, at least yet. But by the time we're done with this video, I believe that many of you will be able to answer this just by looking at them and not necessarily having to go through the process of making a table and plotting the graph and everything. So the first examples say match the equation with a correct graph. So there are 4 equations and then there are 4 graphs. If you want, see if you can match up, write the equation with the graph that it goes with, just as like a guess. Okay? But on the next page I'm going to show you how you go through and make a table and plot your points and then figure out what the graph is. Alright, so let's take a look at page 6. We're going to complete this first graph and complete the table and then do the graph. And when we're in math, in math class, I will actually show you how you can use your graphing calculators to help you with this. Okay? Alright, so we're going to extend the table. We're going to add another column. And that column is going to be 2x minus 3. Okay? We put in the part of the formula that we need to find. Now, what I usually do is, for the input values, or the x values, I start with -2 and go up to +2 or 3 if you want, because this keeps going. To find, basically, if you look on the graph for x, the x values from -2 to +2 are right here in the middle. So we're hoping to find points that will be around this part of the graph, and then that way we know it will fit in there. Okay? So here's what we do. We plug in the value for x, -2, and -2 times 2 is -4, minus 3 is -7. Now that unfortunately won't fit on this graph because it only goes down to -6. The next one will, though, -1. 2 times -1 is -2, minus 3 is -5. 2 times 0 is 0, minus 3 is -3. And some of you might be spotting a pattern as we're doing this. That's a good thing. 2 minus 3 is -1. 4 minus 3 is 1. And then let's just do one more because we've got the space for it. And obviously this is going to be 3, 3. Alright, so now what do? Well, we plot the points. So I can't plot the first one, -2, -7, because it doesn't fit. -1, -5 does fit. 0, -3. 1, -1, 2, 1, and then 3, 3. And then you connect your points. Now you should use a ruler to make this nice and straight because it is straight, obviously. So I'm going to connect these points from here to here. Now what you hopefully recognize is this will actually continue this way and this way. So put arrows on the end. Now, what happens? What do you get when you graph this? This is called a linear graph because it is a graph of a straight line. So that's one graph that we have, is a straight line or linear. Alright? Next one is So now we have a different looking equation. So again, extend your table. Now you'll notice this table is a little bit bigger. So this time I'm going to go from -3 all the way up to +3 for my x values. And then I have x squared minus 4. So we're going to plug in -3 for x. Well, -3 squared is -3 times -3, which is 9. Whoops. And 9 minus 4 is 5. So our output value is 5. Then we have -2 squared. So -2 times -2 is 4. 4 minus 4 is 0. Then we have -1 times -1 is 1. Minus 4 is -3. 0 squared is 0. Minus 4 is -4. Now, let's see what happens next. 1 squared minus 4 is -3. That's interesting. 2 squared is 4 minus 4 is 0. That's interesting. 3 squared is 9. 9 minus 4 is 5. Wow. Well, let's see what this graph looks like. So I go over to -3 up to 5. That's my first point. Over to -2 and just put a point there. Over to -1, down to 3, 0, -4. Keep plotting, and it looks like this. Well, that's a very interesting looking graph. This is not a V because it's kind of curved. It's actually more like a U. And it has a special name. The equation is known as a quadratic because of that little 2. And the shape of this graph is actually called a parabola. Very fancy name. I'll be extremely impressed if any of you remember that when you come to math class. All right. Got 2 more that we need to graph. So over on the next page, complete the table and graph the equation. So now this time the equation we have has the straight lines, also known as absolute value. So whatever we get when we do x minus 1, we turn it into a positive number because it's the distance away from 0. That's the definition of absolute value. Alright? So my input values, I'll start at -2, go up to +2. I might even go a little bit beyond. We'll see what we have in here. Okay. So when I plug in -2, -2 minus 1 is -3. But then when I take the absolute value of that, I get +3. Now, -1 minus 1 is -2. -2 absolute value is 2. 0 minus 1 is -1, but the absolute value is 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. Absolute value of 0 is just 0. 2 minus 1 is 1, and the absolute value of that is 1. That's interesting. You know what? Let's go ahead and finish this table off because it will look nice if we do. And then the absolute value of 4 minus 1. So then we have 2 and we have 3. And now watch what happens when we plot this. Alright, so I've got -2, 3. Then I've got -1, 2, 0, 1, 1, 0. And then it starts going like this. Very interesting. What we have here is a straight, this is not like the graph we just did. It is not a parabola. It is a straight line going out that way and a straight line going out that way, creating a V. So this is a absolute value graph or V shape. That's what you get when you find the absolute value. Okay, one more graph to take a look at, and the video is starting to get long, so we're going to do it super quick, so make sure you're paying attention. Here we go. Okay, again, we're going to extend our table. I'm getting good at this, as you can tell. Put our equation up at the top, 2 to the x power. So here's our x values. You may need to use your calculator for this. I'm not sure if any of you know what 2 to the negative 2 power is, but it is actually 1/4 or 0.25. And we'll talk about that in math, especially if you don't understand it. Then we have 2 to the negative 1 power, that is 0.5 or 1/2. Then we have 2 to the 0 power. It is not 0, it is 1. We'll also talk about that in math. 2 to the first power, this one you should know. As with 2 to the second is 4. And 2 to the third is 8. Now, if you want to recognize a pattern, what's happening is it's doubling every time. So obviously 2 to the fourth is going to be 16. The last 2 points aren't going to fit on the graph, so we don't really need these last 2. So let's start with the ones that will fit. So -2 and then 0.25. So I'm going to go halfway is about in the middle, so halfway in between there and the bottom is there. And then -1, 0.5, well, that's about halfway. 0, 1, that's right there. 1, 2, that's there. 2, 4, and that's all I can fit. And what we have here is a nice smooth curve that gets really flat on this end and gets really steep on this end. And this is what's known as an exponential graph or an exponential curve. Okay? Alright, so we're at the end of the video. We completed our homework assignment, pages 4, well actually 6 and 7. 5 there wasn't anything to do yet. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to offer you a chance to earn a whole bunch of points if you're paying attention and listening. So, in this video, there are 4 different types of graphs with some pretty fancy names. So, if at least 4 different people can come up with the names, I will give you a point for every one. And there was actually another name. It started with a Q. That wasn't the name of the graph, but if you can remember that one, I'll give you another point. And if we go back to page 5, again, I need different people to do this. If you can now figure out which graph goes with which equation, then I'll give you an additional 4 points. So I think that's up to like 8 or 9 possible points if you are paying attention and you understand it. If you don't understand it and you need help, make sure you talk to a parent, rewatch the video, come see me. Good luck, and we'll see you in math.